Hi, everybody. I am thrilled to be joining you today and equally thrilled to be introducing our guest. This is a gentleman who I recently got introduced through a mutual colleague on the TEDx platform. And I have experienced his work for many years. I actually lived in London for many years and used to go to Alternatives, which is a project that he co-founded in London, which is at St James's Church, and it's where amazing global change makers, their work was hosted. The last time I was actually there at Alternatives, Russell Brand was launching his book, and I really thought I'd got in there early to get a ticket to sit on the ground floor, and literally the tickets were sold out in seconds, and I ended up actually sitting on the top tier, and what a grand and amazing day that was. I actually also queued for an hour to get my book signed. So that was the last time I was actually in Alternatives. So today we're going to be meeting with Malcolm Stern. Malcolm Stern is he is a psychotherapist for over 30 years. Like I said, co-founder and director of Alternatives. And also Malcolm teaches and runs groups internationally. He's actually just published a new book, which we're going to be hearing all about. You know, this book, Slay Your Dragons with Compassion, was realized after the suicide of his daughter. So first of all, I wanted to just introduce you to Malcolm. Malcolm, thank you for joining us. Hi. And you know, it would be great for people to get to know you a little bit better. Like I said, well, actually I haven't said, but you Alternatives actually inspired an event that I run in Nottingham under my company Tri-Dosha, and it was this desire to really want to spread more light into the world. So I got so inspired by what you guys did, and prior to everything that's going on now, actually we've already hosted 2 events. So we hosted David G last year in April, and then we hosted Jamie Catto in October. So fingers crossed, you know, those live events can continue. Now what would you, we've got so much going on around us, Malcolm, you know, what would you, 30 years as a psychotherapist, what would you, how do you think we can be better prepared for 2020? What's your advice?
Practice is my advice. And this is my book, Slay Your Dragons with Compassion. And what I realized in the writing of this book was that I had learned ways of managing my daughter's death so that when it happened, I already had some resources. I obviously wasn't planning for it to happen, and I didn't know that I'd need resources in that particular way. But I think that we are called on to really make ourselves strong in this time, because it is a very, very challenging time. You know, we don't know what's going on and how long it's going to last, and life is changing rapidly. It needed to, but that doesn't make it any easier to bear either. So I think that we're in times where we need to find our center, find our core, and do the practices that, you know, and they're simple practices. You know, that's what I realized is actually there are 10 practices in my book, and they are things that anyone can do, but we tend to ignore until we get into trouble, and that's often too late.
Yeah, so give us a bit of background. So your daughter, she was in, I believe she was in her 20s, early 20s.
She was in her early 30s.
Early 30s.
Yes.
And so can you tell us a little bit about this journey? You know, what actually what happened, and you know, and then this give you this realization of actually these practices that have been in your life for all this time.
Yeah, about 10 years before Melissa took her life, she'd had a serious mental breakdown. And one day I got a call from her saying, "Hello, Dad, I'm in a lunatic asylum." And I said, "Very funny, Melissa." And she handed the phone to the nurse, and she was in fact in intensive care psychiatry, which was one hell of a shock. And it took a year for her to come through that. She, after about 5 months, she was moved to a regular mental health facility. But it took her a year to get over that. And we thought she'd actually come through, suffered with it, and was clear. But 10 years later, she started getting very hyper again. And I didn't really spot the warning signs, but they were there now in retrospect. And so she started getting very hyper, and she became sort of like, you know, running all over the place. She worked for Kids Company, which was an amazing organization, helping really damaged children. And basically, after she got really high, she got really low and got really depressed for about 6 weeks. And at the end of 6 weeks, she walked off a bridge. And I found out about it while I was running the end of my 1-year group, which is a 1-year psychotherapy group, residential 4-day retreat. It was about 2.5 days in. And I had a phone call from Melissa's mother, who wasn't my ex-wife, but Melissa was the product of an earlier relationship, saying Melissa's not with us anymore. And I said, well, where's she gone? She said, no, she's left the planet, you know, that's. And I went back to run the afternoon session of the group. One of the guys in the group, a guy called David Confino, was also a psychotherapist. And I told him what had happened. I said, David, can you run the group? And he did. And he started saying what had happened for me, and then set up a grief circle. And he said, those who've lost a parent step into the center, and most people stepped into the center. Those who've lost a sibling step into the center, 3 or 4 stepped in. Those who've lost a close friend step in. Those who've lost a child, and there was just me. And at that moment, it landed. And the thing is with shock is it takes a while to come through. And I thought, what's wrong with me? I'm not sobbing and wailing on the floor, but actually it takes a while. And it took months really for me to really penetrate me and truly come through. But Melissa was a very beautiful, vibrant, lovely young woman. She got married the year before to a terrific guy called Ian. And she seemed to be really, really happy. And I think she was happy. But then this came upon her.
Yeah. And through that, part of your healing, is writing this book, and in the book you've got what you've talked about. It's called "Slay Your Dragons with Compassion: 10 Ways to Thrive Even When It Feels Impossible." So firstly, how do you as a psychologist, how do you reconcile this sort of this need and desire, for justice when you're being challenged so much? How do you dig deep to do that?
I think we have to dig deep. When things come upon us, we either find the resources to deal with them, or they squash us. And I mean, I realized there were a number of things that I was doing that were really supportive and helpful. I think the main chapter I would say in the book is create a Sangha. Now, Sangha is a Buddhist term, which means a community of spiritual, like-minded others. And I will, if I can, I'll read you what Thich Nhat Hanh says about Sanghas. He says, Sangha is more than community. It's a deep spiritual practice. A Sangha is a community of friends practicing the Dharma together in order to bring about and contain awareness. The essence of a Sangha is awareness, understanding, acceptance, harmony, and love. When you do not see this in a community, it is not a true Sangha, and you should have the courage to say so. But when you find these elements are present in a community, you know that you have the happiness and fortune of being in a real Sangha. And I think it's really important in these times to band together with others of like mind who can hold us, help us, support us, listen to us, bear witness to us, share with us. So I have a number of personal Sanghas. I have a men's group that I run, but it does feel like my Sangha also. We've been meeting for about 7 years, a group of 10 men. I've got a one-to-one session I have with a friend of mine every Monday morning, and we take half an hour each to share what's going on in our lives, and the other reflects back afterwards, and then the other does it. I have a group of 3 of us, we call a triad, where we meet every 1 to 2 weeks, and we share again, and we challenge each other on the things that that are our blind spots in a loving way, slaying our dragons with compassion. So, yes.
So I mean, this sounds like a really, it's perfect timings in the sense that what a great strategy. So many people are feeling isolated and lonely, and we're hearing, mental health is very much being challenged at the moment. So you started this group 7 years ago. How would you, so others in the community that might hear that and look to you and want to start a similar group, how can they go about it? What would be your advice?
I'd say look at who your friends are at the moment and which of them can really receive you. So another of the chapters in the book is called used to, find your radar. And actually we have is what you would also call your intuition or your sixth sense. But actually we have a radar that tunes in way beyond the spoken word. So we know where the safe places are. And Stephen Levine, who's a great doyen of death and dying, wrote in his book, Meetings on the Edge, that when someone's dying, they're very finely attuned at that stage, and they know who can really go be with them in that place. So they'll, for example, the doctor might come in full of briskness and sort of like, how are you today? And they'll know that he's not really available. He's not really asking, how are you? He's saying, I'm making the right words. And they'll go, fine, thank you, doctor. But then the cleaner might come into their room and they'll sense something in them and they'll talk to them, and they'll open up. In the same way, we don't need to be dying in order to find our radar. Actually, we need to be suffering to be more finely tuned. And I think we need to look at what's around us at the moment already. There might be another friend who needs exactly what we need. So we might get together as a pair, we might get together in a group that bring a few of us together. And what you can do is you can often fish to see what's going, whether they're up for it or not, and just say, I'm really looking to create a support system right now. And I think that you'd be a great person to do that with, or something like that, that you actually give them an intro and you see whether or not there's any real enthusiasm for that. But for most of us, this is more clement than ever. We need support systems.
Yeah, and I agree. I think at the moment it's really important that we do find these networks. There's so many layers to all the information, everything that we're receiving at the moment. So it's also like being guided into these authentic, loving spaces. So another area that you talk about is letting your relationships educate you.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, my first two books were about relationships, and I think relationships, I often call them the yoga of the West. I think one of my teachers, Ram Dass, who you may have heard of, who also spoke alternatives a number of times in the 80s. He said if he starts to believe what people say about him, that he's enlightened, that he's a beautiful being, that he's amazing, he's all these things, all he needs to do is get into a relationship for 6 months. And we can't hide in a real relationship unless you sit there and watch television together all day and just sort of like, don't ever get close to each other. But in a relationship, you're going to be utterly challenged, and a challenge to refine yourself and bring yourself together. So I love the quote I've used of Michael Mead's about relationships. Well, that I've used at the beginning of the relationship chapter, actually. What he says is this: to become equal to the dream sown within us, our heart must break open, and usually must break more than once. That's why they say that the only heart worth having is a broken heart. For only in breaking can it open fully and reveal what is hidden within. And I think we are challenged in our relationship, that every part of us that hasn't really been examined and hasn't really been lived will be forced to be lived within a relationship. And then we either take the decision to go with it or to walk away from the relationship. Now, sometimes we should walk away from relationships if they're abusive, if you find that your partner's not with you in that. But actually, sometimes we can be with someone who dares to go with us to our places of anger, of joy, of sadness, and who dares to go with us into the places where we're really challenged by life and will be part of that process with us.
And when you look at your journey as you see it today, now, when I was doing research on you, I found that you actually, way back, you started off life as an estate agent.
That's right, yes.
That's really interesting. And I thought, I wonder, how would Malcolm, what would he do with what he knows now with all this wisdom?
Well, interestingly, I think as an estate agent, I had a very good radar, so I actually knew what houses people wanted or what offices they wanted. So I think I was already utilising some of those skills, but not in a place that really lit me up. And I was an estate agent. I left school, I went into accountancy, and I thought I'd made a major shift to jump into a semi-profession and become an estate agent. And those were the glory days in London. So it was actually sort of, it was pretty easy to sort of make a good living as an estate agent. But I felt like something was really deeply missing. And one day I went round to a friend's flat. By the way, this is not an advert for drugs at all. I went round to a friend's flat, and he gave me this tiny little tab of blotting paper, and it was LSD. And I took it, and suddenly the whole universe was open to me for a few minutes. You have to earn it the hard way, I believe. I think meditation is what takes us to that place in a genuine way. But suddenly I couldn't pretend anymore that I was happy to be an estate agent. It wasn't in my calling. And I think each one of us has within us what James Hillman calls a diamond, D-A-E-M-O-N, which will push us until we are ready to follow the path that is already set out for us in our DNA, in our basic structure.
Yeah, well, I truly relate to those words. I had have similar journey experiences. Started off life as a business journalist, or being a good Indian daughter as well, and studying a certain way. Ended up in India experiencing meditation, some profound healing treatments, and that set me off on a new path. And but it's these are words, those that are listening to this, how if you have that calling, if you feel deep within that actually you're moving away from what we might call this 3D reality, something that we've been told over many years that this is the reality, and then you're starting to experience something more transcendent, and you're connecting with that side of yourselves. What is your advice again? How do you maneuver that? How did you maneuver
that? Carl Jung said that everything is synchronicity, and things come across our path. And when I left being an estate agent, I went to work in a Whole Foods store because I really loved the whole concept of organic foods. And some of my friends used to go in there and go, "What's happened to you?" But I knew that I was looking for something, and things kept coming on my way. So I got a job with Friends of the Earth, organising a whale day for the Save the Whale campaign. And one day a guy rang up and said, "Oh, I want to talk to you about nuclear power in the Stroud area and blah, blah, blah." So I chatted to him. And I said, "What's your name?" And he said, "Mike Oldfield." And I said, "Oh, the musician?" He said, "Yes." And I said, "Would you like to do a gig for a whale day that I'm organising?" And he said, "Well, yeah, I haven't played for a while, but I'd be up for it." And so I put on this whale day that ended up being 5,000 people coming to Jubilee Gardens on the South Bank. And then Greenpeace were there. And I then went and worked for Greenpeace for a couple of years and sailed on the Rainbow Warrior. And I started to explore all the different angles of myself. I worked for a while in a terminal cancer hospice because I was interested in what's death, and why are we avoiding that so thoroughly in our lives? And then I walked into a therapy group one day. And I thought, this is it. This is what I can do. And I thought, God, you're so arrogant. You've just walked into a group. But actually, it was like I sensed that something was there that was leading me in that direction.
Yeah. So what does work look like for you now? So I know as we started, you're actually moving from London to Devon now, and Devon is where you grew up. So that's already.
No, I grew up in London, but I lived in Devon for a long time when my kids were growing up.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a new transition. This is kind of the start of a new journey. Tell us what is manifesting and unfolding.
Well, a lot of my work has been groups and one-to-one sessions, and all that's been in London. But lots of stuff is online now, and actually we don't need to be in the big city anymore to be part of things. And I think what's manifesting is wanting to live as a quieter, gentler lifestyle, and to be in a place that's softer than London.
Yeah. So just really a couple more questions, Malcolm. Just going back to what we're experiencing around us, this is interesting times for all of us, and what we're experiencing we're experiencing on a global scale. I'm not a mother. I never had children, and though that's sort of always, I've never closed the door on it. But at the moment, I kind of feel I'm kind of glad I didn't take that path, because there's a part of me that feels we're actually, life is really relatively complicated, and actually, would I want to bring, a new soul into this environment? So, what would you say with your professional head on? What is your around this?
I think we're going to have to adapt, and I think individually we're going to have to adapt, and globally we're going to have to adapt, and we have to adapt anyway, because we were killing ourselves on this planet anyway with global warming and all the rest of the things that were going on. And it's like there's loads less flights now. That's amazing. That's interesting. And also it's like I'm no longer, I used to live life at a mad pace. And this year I was meant to be in China working, Greece, Spain, La Gomera, various other places. And actually, I don't really miss that opportunity to keep rushing around the globe. I'm more looking at sort of like finding what's going on inside myself. And I think that's what we're called to do as a species, is to actually slow down and sort of take the medicine and see what's demanded of us in these difficult times. We are in a dystopian reality. This is a pretty scary place to be. Let's find companionship in this, and let's find resources in this that we can manage it.
And some groups, I'm also on some groups, and we're talking about this time being absolutely a spiritual awakening, that we are sort of riding a wave, and more people are moving into a space of actually, as you have talked about, connecting with their higher self, with higher states of consciousness. Why is it important to personally evolve, right now?
That's the call. I mean, I think that's what's in front of us. And, we can't just carry on with life as usual. It's not life as usual. Therefore, what do? Do we go, oh my God, this is so awful, I'd better just lock myself away and wait till it's over and stick my head in my hands? Or what can I do to educate myself so that I can move forwards and embrace the reality that is there? Because it's the fighting with reality that causes us pain, rather than the reality that's happening to us. How we actually encounter it is what causes us pain.
Yeah, great, thanks. So your book, so Slay Your Dragons with Compassion. It's published by Watkins, and it is available.
It is available, and what was great about this book is because I felt like Melissa was with me when I was writing it, and that sounds a bit fanciful, but actually, what's great about the book is that I sent it out to a few of the people who'd spoken at Alternatives for endorsements, and actually Eckhart Tolle came back to me, Elizabeth Gilbert, Jack Cornfield, Craig David. A lot of people were touched by the story, and I think that's what's been powerful in it. And it is available in bookstores. You probably have to order it at the moment, but and also on Amazon and various other sites.
Wonderful, great. Well, thank you so much for your time. I look forward to reading the book and continuing to see your journey manifest and unfold. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Sunita.
Thank you.